l'Académie Chap, Éducation Plus, du cours de la 6e en terminale, en podcast.
Theme 4, Information and Communication. Text, the freedom of the press. It should never be forgotten that the newspaper is not only a news giver. It is also a guardian of our liberties and must therefore have liberty itself. Of course, none of us are completely free to do what we like. Complete freedom of action would mean walking without permission into people's private houses or burning a church down when we felt like it. And so, to prevent this sort of chaos, we have restrictions placed upon us, with policemen to see they are enforced. In exactly the same way, the freedom of the press doesn't mean that newspapers may print anything they like. The newspaper, like the individual, has to observe certain rules of conduct. In wartime, the newspapers would be heavily punished if it printed military secrets of value to the enemy. By law, it is threatened with severe penalties if it allows anything blasphemous, sacrilegious, offensive, seditious, subversive, rebellious, or libellous, unfounded, to appear in its columns. It is not allowed to print photographs of debates in the Houses of Parliament or proceedings in a court of laws, or the actual hanging of the murderer. In other words, the newspaper has precisely the same amount of freedom as the average citizen. The importance of this can be ever emphasized. If the press were not at liberty to report the debate in Parliament houses, the proceedings of law courts, the civil service, local authorities, and the decisions of foreign governments, dark deeds might be done in the name of the people which the people themselves would detest. And how much the nation would lose in inspiration if newspapers were prevented from recording the achievements of statesmen, seamen, explorers, scientists, artists, inventors, and the millions of workers in industry. Part 1. Comprehension questions. 1. What must the conduct of a newspaper be like? 2. What may be the temptation of monopoly? 3. Why can't a newspaper be completely free? 4. Why is the freedom of the press so important for people? 5. Why would the nation lose in inspiration if newspapers were not free? Part 2. Translate. Translate the third paragraph of the text into French from, in exactly the same way, the freedom of the press doesn't. 2. The newspaper has precisely the same amount of freedom as the average citizen. Part 3. Essay. Talk about the importance of the freedom of the press in your country. Write about 15 to 20 lines. Brainstorming. What are the different kinds of press do you know nowadays? Give some example of press in your country, and in the world. Students give the different kinds of press they know, then enumerate some examples. Possible answers: print press, media, audiovisual, radio and television, online press, blog. Possible example of presses students can give in Chad, Chad et culture, Lavoix, Jamin Abayhto, Observateur, Les Progrès, Electron TV, Tel Chad, and so on. In other countries, Jeune Afrique, Le Point, Daily Nation, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Le Monde, Le Figaro, Cameroon Tribune, L'Union, Africa and Degrees 1, RFI, etc. Part 4. Vocabulary. Newsgiver, a person or entity that provides news. Liberty, the state of being free within society from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's way of life. Libellous, a term used to describe a false statement that harms a person's reputation. 3. Seditious, refers to actions or words intended to provoke or incite rebellion against government authority. Proceeding, the process of appearing before a court of law so a decision can be made about an argument or claim. Ever emphasized, this term refers to something that is continually stressed or highlighted as important. deeds, actions that are performed intentionally or consciously. Achievement, something accomplished, especially by superior ability, special effort, great courage. Statesmen, experienced politicians, especially ones who are respected for making good judgments. Seamen, sailors or mariners, typically those who are skilled in seamanship. Scientist, a person who is studying or has expert knowledge of one or more of the natural or physical sciences. Part 1. Answer. Comprehension questions. 1. The newspaper must be conducted like an individual. As a guardian of our liberties, it must have liberty itself. 2. The temptation of monopoly of press may lead to the dictatorship situation. 3. A newspaper cannot be completely free because, like individual, it has to observe certain rules of conduct. 4. The freedom of the press is so important because it's the press that reveals to people the achievements of statesmen, seamen, etc. 5. If the newspapers were not free, the nation would lose in inspiration, because the nation will be led in a situation of single thought, in other words the situation of dictatorship. Part 2. Answer. Translation of the third paragraph into French.
Exactement de la même manière, la liberté de la presse ne signifie pas que les presses sont permises de faire tout ce qu'elles veulent. Les journaux, comme les individus, doivent observer certaines règles de conduite. En temps de guerre, le journal pourrait être lourdement puni s'il imprime un secret militaire de valeur pour l'ennemi. Il est menacé de sévères pénalités s'il se permet de faire apparaître quelque chose de blasphématoire, séditieux ou diffamatoire dans ses colonnes. Il ne lui est pas permis d'imprimer les photographies des débats au Parlement ou des procès à la cour, ou la pendaison d'un meurtrier. En d'autres termes, le journal a précisément la même quantité de liberté qu'un citoyen ordinaire.
Part 3. Answer. Essay. Talk about the importance of the freedom of the press in your country. The press refers to the different mass media including newspapers, televisions, magazines, blogs, and media practitioners whose job is the dissemination of the information and education of people on the need for democracy and its values among the people. But, in the following lines, we will see a free press is important in a democratic country. Lawyer and free press advocate Trevor Timm states that an independent press is one of the essential pillars of a democracy. He also goes on to say that the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and its protection of the press has always been the rampart against secret government, against authoritarianism and against tyranny. The press is often thought of as a fourth branch of government because it also helps balance power in the government. Without that fourth branch, the concept of a democratic system of government starts to weaken and after a while the democracy would disintegrate. However, in all developing countries, the press is not free to do its job. Governments consider the press as enemy and refuse to give it information. For example, in a period of election or armed conflicts, the journalists are arrested and put in prison because they didn't inform the people in the way the governments want. They think that the information from the press are unreliable sources of information. To conclude, we think that the press is very important in all of our lives because it keeps us informed on what's happening in the world around us.
Exactement de la même manière, la liberté de la presse ne signifie pas que les presses sont permises de faire tout ce qu'elles veulent. Les journaux, comme les individus, doivent observer certaines règles de conduite. En temps de guerre, le journal pourrait être lourdement puni s'il imprime un secret militaire de valeur pour l'ennemi. Il est menacé de sévères pénalités s'il se permet de faire apparaître quelque chose de blasphématoire, séditieux ou diffamatoire dans ses colonnes. Il ne lui est pas permis d'imprimer les photographies des débats au Parlement ou des procès à la cour, ou la pendaison d'un meurtrier. En d'autres termes, le journal a précisément la même quantité de liberté qu'un citoyen ordinaire.
10e en terminale, podcast, académie, chat, éducation. plus des cours de la 6e en terminale en podcast.